right, everyone, thank you for joining us. We are so excited to have Suzi Smith here to discuss Neuro Linguistic Programming. Suzi, I'll let you take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, I see people I know, but I'm still going to take just a minute to talk about my background and how I ended up where I am. I live in McCall, but right now I'm down in Boise enjoying the good weather down here. And years ago, back in the late 70s, I started a business with another guy. His name was Tim Hallbaum, and we were really involved in teaching people how to reduce the stress in their lives. But we had a really interesting way of doing that. Instead of saying, well, you have to eliminate external things in your life that are creating stress, our focus of attention was on internal things. What are you thinking and how are you behaving that might be creating stress for you? And it was a really interesting subject back in the early 80s, of course. Lots of people were talking about stress then. And guess what? We're still talking about it all these years later. So he and I developed some training programs to help people change their behaviors and their ways of thinking. And we were quite successful, actually, out of what we taught. And then we discovered something called Neuro Linguistic Programming, NLP. One of our students in one of our classes introduced us to this new technology. In a minute, I'll talk about what that is. And we became fascinated by it and began our journey in learning how to use NLP. In those days, we were in Salt Lake City. The closest NLP training center was in Boulder, Colorado. And so we had to travel great distances to get our learning. And back then, the training was set up to where you went 4 days a month for 7 months to learn this new technology that had been created. And so it was quite an adventure for us. And as we began adding NLP into the trainings that we were doing, we discovered it was so much more effective than anything else we had done. And we eventually co-authored a couple of books, and one was one of the original students of NLP. And so we became known in the land of NLP as the people who could teach you how to be healthier and could work with health issues using NLP. So I began training all over the world. COVID brought me to a screeching halt because you can't get into the other countries. And I used to travel in and out of McCall a lot. And now the other countries are really having a struggle. Believe it or not, we're better off in America than they are in Europe right now. I was supposed to go to Holland next month to do a training, and I just heard from my sponsor that it's possible I'm not going to be able to go because our students are from all over Europe, and we've got one from Hong Kong and a couple from Egypt, and they're saying they won't be able to get into Holland. So we're lucky here in America, we really are, but it's shut me down. So I appreciate being able to share with you in this way because I'm not getting a chance to travel and share my learnings in other countries right now. So what is this stuff that I'm going to teach you about called NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming? Well, if you look at the words, linguistic is about language, and NLP was created at the University of California in Santa Cruz in the mid-1970s by a linguistic professor and a student, a really bright student who was in computer programming, who was really interested in patterns, the patterns that people use when they're doing things that either work for them or don't work for them. And so these two, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, got together and did a process called modeling. And what modeling is how we learn so many things in our life. We learned how to walk and talk and dress ourselves by watching and copying the other people around us. That's what modeling is all about. And that's basically how they created this technology called NLP. They modeled 3 people in the early days that were really exquisite communicators that could assist other people through the use of their language in getting them to change. And so it's about how you program your language to make a difference in all of your neurology. And when people say, well, what exactly is NLP? I just say, well, it teaches you how to use your mind, body, spirit, especially your brain. It teaches you how to use all of what you have available to you so that you can be healthy and happy. So, and many, many books have been written on the subject. And there, like I say, I train all around the world. So it's very popular. So I'm assuming all of you signed up because you wanted to learn something. And what I said was, this is going to be very practical and very experiential. And it's hard to just learn by listening. So I'm going to ask you to play along with me as I teach you these various things. Actually do them and notice what happens when you do it yourself. So, and when we're all through, if you have more questions about NLP, what it is, etc., I'll be happy to answer those. But let's launch right into what you can do with it. So first of all, I want you to imagine that you are standing in front of your refrigerator. So put yourself in front of your refrigerator and imagine that you open the door and you look inside and you see a nice fresh lemon in your refrigerator. I'd invite you to pick up that lemon, take it out of your refrigerator and close the door. Feel it in your hand. I ask you to pick it up. Notice the weight of it, the texture of it, and look down at it and notice how it's got bumps on the outside of the skin. It's yellow in color. And then put it up to your nose and smell it. Even through the skin, you can tell, oh, that's a lemon smell. Now, lay it down on the cutting board and take a knife and slice that lemon in 2. And notice the little bumps of moisture that come around where you created the slice. And then put it up to your nose and smell it again. And notice what it smells like now. Much stronger. Nothing smells quite like a lemon. Then I would invite you to lay it back down and cut a very small wedge out of that lemon. And then put it up to your mouth and take a nice juicy bite out of that lemon and swirl the juices around in your mouth. And notice what happens when you do that. Most people pucker. Now, I didn't see some of you puckering, so I'm wondering if you're actually doing it, because your mind, body, spirit cannot tell the difference between a real lemon that you would do that with, and me helping you create an imaginary lemon that you're working with. So the thoughts that you have create a difference in your neurology. All of you will respond based on whatever it is that you are thinking in your mind. And why that's so important is we can change our thoughts and get different responses to things in the world. When we do that, it automatically works. So that's just a little experiment. Now let's do one more. So where you're sitting, I would invite all of you to look straight ahead to begin with. And then gently turn your head to your left as far as you can, comfortably. And notice where your eyes go when you do that. How far around and how comfortable is it? Then turn your head back to the center again. Look straight ahead. And then I would invite you to do the same to the other side. Turn as far as you can turn. And notice there's probably a difference. One side may be a little stiffer than the other. Then bring your head back to the center again. Okay, so probably most of you noticed that one side may have a like almost a kink in it. It doesn't allow you to go as far. Now we're going to do an experiment. And without actually doing anything with your head or your body, I want you to imagine that you could actually loosen up the muscles in your shoulders. Don't do it, just imagine doing it. And imagine that you could say to yourself, let my neck be free. Let my neck be free. And imagine that when you say those words, you can actually feel your neck elongating and freeing something up so you could move more smoothly. And then again, without actually doing it, imagine that you could turn your head smoothly and easily to each side with no kinks, no obstructions whatsoever as you do that. You're just imagining doing it. And now we want to test it. So do what you did to begin with. Turn your actual head to the left and see how far you can go with your eyes this time and how your neck feels. Okay, back to the center. Then to the right. And back to the center. Now, just by a show of hands, how many of you could look further and felt more comfortable after doing that? You should be able to just by visualizing it. So you have much more access by visualizing. And notice I was having you direct yourself to say, let my neck be free. And that actually allows your neck to free itself up. So what I'm doing is I'm establishing this mind, body, spirit connection. All parts of you are connected together. Whatever you are thinking or saying to yourself or feeling will make an incredible difference in the sensations in your body and what you're creating inside your body. So that's why these things that we're going to do with NLP actually can work to make a difference for you, because you direct yourself and because your mind can't tell the difference between an internal image you're making and something you're seeing outside, you can make a huge difference in your response to something. So, kind of content that we could deal with. And I thought, well, we work with 3 things today as I'm here on this Zoom with you. First, we can work with your thought patterns. Remember, I said NLP really was created out of noticing patterns. So what kind of thought patterns can you have that would make a difference in your life? Then we'll deal with emotional patterns, feelings. How could you recognize what the state of your body is like and actually change it if you need to? And then how can you use all of that to change behaviors so that you have some control over your life, that you can actually make a difference in what happens for you? So we'll start right out with thoughts. And I don't know if this has ever happened with any of you. It happens to me on a regular basis that I get some kind of recurring thought that goes around and around and around in my mind, and I can't stop thinking about it. And the more I think about it, the more it puts me in a negative feeling state or gets me upset. The time I have it the worst is when I'm trying to go to sleep and I don't seem to be able to shut my brain off. These thoughts going round and round and round, obsessing about something. So what do you do about that? How do you get yourself to stop thinking about a thought? Well, a real simple way to do it is something called thought stopping, a real technical term. And it implies that you stop your thoughts. So to do this, and I'm going to have you practice it in just a minute, but let me tell you about it. When you're going around and around with thoughts, and with the COVID, it's just, I mean, I've heard lots of people say, well, I'm afraid of this. I'm fearful of this. And I go round and round and imagine what's the worst that can happen. Well, when you find yourself stuck in a loop like this, the first thing you can do is imagine that a stop sign pops up in your internal field of vision. You all know what a stop sign looks like. You know, they're red and they have edges on them. And at the same time that you see this stop sign pop up inside your mind's eye, imagine saying loudly to yourself, and if you're in a place where nobody else is around, you can say it out loud, stop. And notice you drop at the end of this, the word, stop. And notice what happens just when you say the word stop, like that. Most people find themselves holding their breath, and you stop whatever you were doing, whatever you were thinking about. So the first part of this is getting yourself to stop that way. And then, because most of us have stopped breathing, I suggest the next thing you could do is take a big, deep breath, a cleansing breath after you stop the thought. And then we're going to replace this loop that we were in with a thought that would be more pleasant for us to have. So you could say one word to yourself like peace. Or you could say a sentence that directs you. I'm in control. I'm relaxed. I'm in charge of my life. Or you could whistle a happy tune. So you have lots of choices with what you could do after you have stopped and gotten yourself to take a breath. So I said, you need to practice this. So think of something that you might think about when you go to bed, or any other time that you get stuck in thoughts about, what if this happens? What if that happens? And as you're having that thought, see this in your mind's eye, stop sign pop up and say, stop. Take a deep breath. And say something positive to yourself that you would repeat, or whistle a happy tune. Now, guess what? That thought might come back. They have a mind of their own, you know? So what? It doesn't take any time. The thought comes back again, then you go, stop. You breathe. Say whatever you're going to say. I'm in control. Peace. Relax. You direct yourself. Then, 10 seconds later, you may notice, oh, here's that thought back again. Repeat, stop. Breathe. And I've found I don't have to do it any more ever than 5 times. And it stops. It gets the notion that you're in control. So before we go on, does anybody have any questions about that? It's simple and easy. Think ahead of time about a good sentence that you could use in any circumstance. We call them affirmations that you would repeat after you let that thought go. So thought stopping. Simple, easy, doesn't take you any time. I've actually had people stop habitual habits that they have using this. So I understand that a lot of people have put on extra weight on their body during COVID, because when they're bored and not thinking about anything else to do, they go to the refrigerator. Well, to find something to eat or go in the kitchen. If that ever happens, you can say, stop, breathe, I'm in control. And it will force you to think about something else. I've helped people stop smoking using this by doing this thought stopping. So it sounds simple and easy, but it can work for many powerful things. So that's the process called thought stopping. Okay, another one that you can do. How many of you might have a critical voice or a judgmental voice that tells you what you're doing wrong, that says things like, you're so dumb. That was such a stupid idea you had. Why can't you ever do anything right? It's completely natural and normal to have internal voices talking to you. I like to explain that to people, because sometimes people think, well, if you talk to yourself, you're crazy. But actually, almost everyone I know has internal voices going at them all the time. So I want you to think of something that you might be critical of yourself, about yourself. And notice, this is important, the pattern. Where do you hear that voice coming from? Many people find it's sitting on one shoulder or another, projecting into their ear. Oftentimes. So think about a critical voice, a time you're critical of yourself, and notice, where do you hear that voice? And notice the tone that voice uses when it speaks to you, when it's being critical and judgmental of you. It probably doesn't say it in a nice tone of voice. So listen to how that sounds. And then this is so simple, you won't believe how well it works. But take that voice, say, for instance, if it's sitting on your shoulder or sitting in your ear or wherever, move it down to your right big toe. So put your critical voice in your right big toe. Notice what your critical voice sounds like if you move it to a different location. What if it were in the end of your finger instead of wherever you heard it? Usually they're somewhere here around your head. And coming from your right big toe, it muffles it. And you usually won't have the same response to it that you would have had otherwise. That's a real simple, easy thing you can do. Every time you find yourself being critical of yourself, move the location of the voice and the way it's talking to you. And so make it sound different. What if it sounded like Donald Duck and went, wah, rah, 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 rah. You wouldn't listen to it the same. So it's really interesting to play around with those kinds of things. Okay, one other thing I want to teach you about changing your thoughts that can be really powerful. And what I'd like you to do with this, again, it could be something, a thought that keeps coming back over and over again, or something that happened to you that you notice you have bad feelings whenever you think about it. You had an argument with somebody, a disagreement with somebody, or you fell down and hurt yourself. Any kind of thought like that. This process I'm going to teach you. Actually, we use for helping people get over post-traumatic stress, PTSD. It's so powerful. Or anytime, again, you're obsessing and going around in circles with your thoughts. So think of some thought that might repeat. Even a thought like, I'm so sick of this COVID stuff. I wish it were all over with. I've heard that many times, and I've actually heard myself saying that. So think of something like that. And then I'm going to ask you to do something very strange that most people would not think to do. If you have a pen or a pencil handy, you can use it. If not, you just use your thumb or your finger. But if you have a pencil, and this is what I'm going to suggest that you can do. First of all, think the thought, even, boy, I just wish this COVID were all gone. I wish we could go back to life as normal. But notice when you think something like that, how do you feel inside your body? Oftentimes you get a sinking sensation somewhere in your gut. So notice the feeling, and then take your finger or a pencil or a pen, hold your head steady, and imagine actually that you have a string, if you're using your thumb or your finger, a string attached from your nose to that so that your nose won't move. And I'm going to ask you to move your eyes around in a circle. Not your head, not your nose, just your eyes in a circle as you think that thought. And you do it about 3 times. And then Move it in the other direction. About 3 times. And then just let it go. Now, notice what happens. Jan Troutner, don't make it so big. Make it smaller, like about around your face. You're doing that, you don't use your eyes that far out. So make it about around your face. That's better, yeah. Notice what happens when you do that. Okay, this is where I would like some of you to comment on what do you notice about the thought you were having when you try to think it again after you've done that. Not quite so big, Bob, a little smaller. So about like this. And just moving your eyes, it's kind of hard to do.
It's kind of a distraction.
It is.
I mean, it takes you out of your body. It really seems to take you away from whatever was happening in your body because you're concentrating on something else.
Excellent comment. That's what it's intended to do.
Yeah.
And that's why it works so well for the post-traumatic stress or any traumas. It's what we call a pattern interrupt. So anytime you are upset about something, and I didn't suggest this to begin with, but what you can do is take, you know, any visual images you have, any kinesthetic sensations in your body, thoughts about it, just collect them all up and put them out there on the end of your finger and go, all of this is going out there, and then move it around. About 3 times. Don't go too fast or you make yourself dizzy. Okay? And going too big, you're going to want to move your head and your nose along with it. And the whole idea is you're moving your eyes in a circular manner. And you move your eyes in different places depending on which of your senses you're using. So it breaks up your pattern of thinking. And I typically start going clockwise and then I go counterclockwise, kind of unwinding it at the end. And yeah,
Suzi, sometimes my strategy has always been to just get up, change locations, and get involved in something else. It seems like a much easier way. But when I do that, sometimes it's in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. And I think the stop thinking might work there too. But I get out of bed, I go read, I do something to kind of change my thoughts. Would this also work in the middle of the night? Of course, you have
absolutely, and you won't have to get out of your nice warm bed.
Yeah,
try it. It really does work beautifully. And there's another variation on it that I could suggest that you could do that's a little more sophisticated, but also works, which is to imagine that a figure 8 on its side, laying down in front of you, and move your eyes around the figure 8 with again. So you don't have to do this. I was just suggesting that's about how big it is, a figure 8 on its side, because that moves you around all the different thought processes you might have, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, and it really breaks up the thought. So that's another way you can use it. But the circles work just great for doing that. And not too fast or you make yourself dizzy. Too slow, you forget what you were doing. So, and too big and you can't follow it. That's why I was suggesting those of you who were using real big movements, you make them a little smaller, okay? All right, so those are some things you can do with your thoughts. Now I want to move on to feelings quickly. What can you do to change your emotions? Think of a time when you had a strong emotion, like, I'll give you some examples: anger, anxiety, frustration, fear. The lady who developed this process I'm going to teach you next did it with school students when they had test anxiety. So anything that you know typically would bring a strong emotional feeling in you. So for this to work, just think of a time when even you were standing in the grocery store, and if you're a person who prefers to wear masks, you look over and see somebody who's not masked and you get kind of indignant about that. It could be anything that simple. All right, so come up with your own example. And then this usually works better if you close your eyes when you're doing it. Sometime you were upset in some way, okay? So close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, inside your mind somewhere, have the word appear that would describe the feeling you're having. It might be disgust, it might be anger, it might be fear, whatever. See the word somewhere appear inside your mind, and notice where you're seeing that. It could be to the left, to the right, up, in the middle, down. Notice where you see that word that represents your strong feeling. Then notice how the word appeared. Is it in italics? Is it in bold print? You know, you have so many choices when you're using your computer programs in the font that you would use. So we would say, notice the font it appeared in. And notice what color the word is, because often our visual images come in color. And then imagine you see that word, you see the way it's written and what color it is, that there are corks in the bottom of each letter, and you pull the corks out and the color begins to drain out of the letters so that the word begins to float. It gets lighter, begins to float, and then maybe go way out in the distance, almost like a balloon, as all the color drains out of that word and it gets lighter and lighter. And notice it could get so light and so lacking in color that it just disappears somewhere out there in the distance. That word, it disappears because it got so light, it couldn't stick around. And then wherever it disappeared, in that same location, way out, wherever it disappeared, have another word appear for how you want to feel in that situation you thought of. So it might be peaceful, relaxed, oneness, and then let that word drift down from that faraway location, get heavier as it does, and come right back to settle down in the location where the first word was. And then, of course, notice how you feel when that new word is there in front of you. If you are truly doing that, you will have different physical sensations inside your body. How many of you did notice that? If you actually did it, you have different sensations inside your body. So this woman that developed this, her name was June Jackson, taught the kids who had so much test anxiety in her classes how to do this. And usually the word that appeared for them was frightened or scared or anxious. And typically it was bold and dark in color, their word. And so she had them come up with this idea of pulling the corks out and letting the color drain out and letting the word float off and out in the distance, and have the kids think about how they wanted to feel when they went into a test instead of frightened and anxious, comfortable, confident, relaxed. You can do this in any circumstance to change your feelings, because people think it's hard to change feelings. Well, notice that you'll have a different sensation in your body when you do this. Absolutely. If you're following along and doing it. So again, it's simple, easy process that uses the way you're thinking. And it's amazing to me, if I ever work with a large group of people and I say, what was your word? If people say anger, the word anger often comes up as red, but anxiety and frustration often come up as black. It's just really interesting. They don't come up as pretty colors, pastel colors. They create anxious feelings inside your body. Okay, for the next thing I want to teach you, I'm going to ask you in a second to stand up, because you'll notice more when you are standing. And for this, Joan, do you have a question before we go on?
Yeah, I hate to be interrupting so often, but the example you gave of someone, what I'm wondering about is the speed, because the example you gave was someone like standing, seeing someone that isn't masked, assuming that someone that maybe you have to interact with and you want to get rid of that feeling. How quickly can you do this?
Oh, you can do it really quickly.
Okay. So it isn't a matter of standing back and giving yourself time to cool off. That's, I guess, what I'm trying to get at.
Well, if you find yourself obsessing about people like that in the world and you want to let go of those feelings are not going to be good for you to have, right. Then you want to take the time to really think about the feeling and sit down and do this. But you could be standing there and imagine. You can do it with your eyes open too.
Okay.
Imagine the word that you're feeling, see it going out in the distance, seeing something else come back, settle back down, and you're standing there in front of the person with your eyes open, and you have access to a different feeling automatically. Yeah, you can do all of these things in more depth. But they will work on the spot.
On the spot, well. Okay. Thank you.
They will work on the spot. Okay, for the next process I want to show you, it's about how down and blue and depressed people have been feeling about COVID and not being able to see and do and be around all the people they want to be around. I've never suffered from depression in my life, but I've had a couple of episodes of feeling pretty bad during COVID when I realized I hadn't seen my family for 9 months and things like that. So this is specifically for when you feel down. Okay? And I want to show you a simple thing called postural re-anchoring that you can do whenever you feel down. But to do this, you'll get more out of it if you stand up. So I'm going to stand up along with you. Think about how you feel when you're feeling down or blue, okay? And notice, typically what most people do is this. You see my shoulders slump? Think about all your attention going right here to your gut when you feel down and blue. Think about being depressed. And to get yourself feeling even more depressed, say, oh, this is so awful. I hate this. I wish it would go away. And as you're having those kind of feelings and slumping down like this, keep those thoughts. And the only thing I'm going to ask you to change is your physiology. So keeping those thoughts, put your hands up over your head and look up, straight up. And try to feel depressed when you've got your hands over your head looking up. Okay, now shake that off. How many of you notice a difference in how you're holding your body? Let's do it again. Just even shoulders in, feelings right here. Ah, this is awful. This is so horrible. I can't stand it. And then instead, eyes up, hands over the head. Now try to say, this is awful. With your hands up like that, you can't say it in the same way. And you can't feel depressed in the same way. It automatically works. Now, how can you do that in public? Well, instead, if you notice that you're kind of walking around with your head hung down, push your shoulders back and move your eyes up. You don't have to put your hands over your head and you'll still get the same thing. You will feel automatically different the minute you do that. Okay, you can sit back down again. I had this wonderful aunt, my mother's sister, who was put in a nursing home when she got ill. And she didn't end up staying there, but when she got in there, she was so depressed. And I went to visit her and I noticed she was just hanging like this. You know, you can hear it in people's voices and everything. And I said, you know, Aunt Lucille, look up. And she looked up at the ceiling. She said, what am I looking at? And I said, well, look up and make pictures of what you want to be able to do again and how wonderful your life is outside of this place. And she said, oh, that feels so much better. So the next time I went to visit her, it was very funny. You know, they had trays that they have that they bring the food in and put them in front of people that are in bed. On her tray, there was a sign that said, Suzi says, look up. And she had gotten herself out of the depression by constantly reminding herself to look up. Now, why does that work? Because when we're making images, visual images, we're usually moving our eyes up to the left or the right. When we're accessing our emotions and our feelings, we're usually looking down. So if you're feeling down, I mean, our language even mimics it. If you're feeling down and looking down, you're going to stay down. And that's why, you know, pushing your shoulders back, putting your posture up and moving your eyes up will put you into visual images, and it will be much harder for you to be feeling depressed at any point in time. Now, we're getting close to our time. One more thing. I want to teach you how to create a new behavior if you want it. So I'd like you to think of something. At this point, I would invite you to think of something that you would like to change, a specific behavior you might like to change. Like you might like to remember where you put your keys, or you want to be able to get out of bed easier in the morning, or something like that. Simple behavior. Hang your coat up when you take it off. It doesn't have to be a tricky behavior, but just something that you would like to make more automatic in your life. And think about what you do now. What's your behavior that you do now? And I'd invite you to, in the distance, see yourself doing this behavior. So you can see what it is you do you would like to change. But you see yourself in the distance doing this. So you know, this is what I am doing in this circumstance. I hear the alarm and I push the snooze button and roll over and go back to sleep. And then I'm late in getting up and I have to rush around. And I don't want to do that anymore. Okay? So that's your baseline. That's what you're doing currently. Now let that image go and think about, what is it in this circumstance you would like to do instead of that? What would be a better behavior for you to do? So if I take that example I just gave you, then I'm going to, out there in the distance, again, run a movie of me doing what I would like to do instead. So I go, well, it would be really nice if when my alarm goes off in the morning, I turn it off, I sit up on the side of the bed, I stretch and say, oh, it's time to get on with my day, and get out of bed. That looks a lot better, and I would feel a lot better if I were to do that. So now, with whatever you're thinking of, what would you like to do instead? And run a movie of you doing that and see if it looks good to you. See yourself doing what you would like to do. And does it look good to you? Does it look reasonable? And if it does, then you drop the movie and imagine stepping into actually doing it. So in my case, with the example I gave you, I imagine being in bed. I hear my alarm going off. I roll over and turn the alarm off, sit up on the bed, stretch, and imagine getting up and going on with my day and say, it's time to get on with my day. So I'm in the experience, noticing how it feels. When it feels good, and it feels a whole lot better, then I say, okay, let me imagine tomorrow morning, I'm laying in bed, I hear the alarm go off, I reach over, I turn it off, I sit up on the edge of the bed, I feel that, I feel my body stretching and feel myself getting up and saying, it's time to get on with my day. So we call that in NLP future pacing, remembering to put it in the future so that the next day I've already rehearsed that. And that's what I do when I hear my alarm go off. So think about what you want to do instead. I had you imagine running a movie of that. And now step into the movie and imagine yourself doing that new behavior and notice how it feels. Does it feel good in your body? And when it feels good, you know you have permission to think about doing that the next time you're in that circumstance. That you would actually go through that action, whatever it is. Well, I'm sorry, it's 5 o'clock. I've gone on a whole hour. And I could go on teaching you forever because there's so many things that you can do for your health and well-being. But I taught you how to do thought stopping and moving your voice, some critical voice somewhere else, and breaking up your thought patterns by rolling your eyes around. Thinking of an anxious situation and letting the word flow out and then come back. Re-anchoring your posture by looking up and now creating a new behavior. So my wish for you is that you will actually do some of these things and notice what a difference it can make in your life. Now, Sam, do we have time for people to ask questions or should we cut it off?
We definitely have some time. If anybody would like to ask Suzi any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, and we'll wrap it up. We'll give you another 15 minutes because this has been so wonderful and I've learned so much and I can't wait to practice some of these exercises myself. So thank you, Suzi.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I'm open for any questions you might have about anything I've taught you or comments.
I thought they were all very good, but I thought the one that when you say a word and you have the plugs and you're able to pull it, release and leave. I thought that would be one that I would use.
Good, good.
Yeah, and let it flow out. Just let it go. Right.
Well, and so the nice thing about that too is let it flow out to the earth. And Mother Earth loves all the stuff you give her. She turns it into fertilizer and makes it useful. So you can imagine, oh, I'm sharing this with Mother Earth to make fertilizer, to make new things grow.
Grow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions?
Hey, Suzi, this is Tracy.
Hi, Trace.
Hi. I used actually the whole shoulder back and looked up and raised my hands yesterday because I had a situation that kind of really emotionally affected me with a friend. And I kind of started getting depressed, and I remembered that through, of course, the classes. And I immediately felt better, and I used the whole stop thing. And it was like by the end of the evening, I'm like, I don't even know why she said that. It has nothing to do with me. So thank you for the reminder on that. That was great.
Good, good. Yeah.
Suzi, I have a question.
Okay.
Deanna.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. That was fantastic. Those were so useful and easy to understand. I'm curious if we wanted more resources or to learn more about that. What do you suggest as kind of next steps?
For learning more about NLP?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's lots of trainings going on around the US, but there's some good books that you could read to get an idea of more. And I'm sure there are probably videos on YouTube about NLP. Now, the site that you would want to look at, a lot of people look at Wikipedia, and with NLP, you don't look at the regular Wikipedia site, but NLP Wiki, WIKI.org, was written by all the students in NLP. So it's much more factual. The person that runs the regular Wikipedia doesn't like us and says lots. So NLPwiki.org would give you lots more information about it.
Wonderful.
And there's just so many books out there that have been written about NLP that are interesting to various subjects, because they have modeled, I mentioned they modeled in the beginning really exquisite communicators. Everything you can imagine has been modeled by the students since then. My business partner and I modeled the way native healers think about healing, and we added that into our workshops that we do. So somebody modeled really good traders on the stock market. They've modeled sports performers, people who do well with that. And how to use it in education. NLP is useful in every walk of life, because it gives you more control over yourself and how you use your mind, body, spirit. So,
Suzi?
Yes?
I think you're also being modest, because on your website, I think they could access your CDs.
Okay.
I know you don't want to, toot your own horn, but I've listened to the CDs that you have on various topics, so they're available.
So yeah, my website is suzismith.net. And I created some audio CDs for healing that are available for downloads off of that. Yeah. Anyway, other questions? Thanks for your interest, Deanna. It's fascinating. Well, if there's no more questions or comments, I would like to thank you all for spending an hour with me and letting me teach what I love. This has been so hard for me with COVID to not be able to teach and share, because it's so simple and easy and can make such a difference in your life when you learn how to run your own mind, body, spirit, instead of leaving it up to chance. And we all deserve to be happy and healthy, as far as I can tell. So,
Suzi, thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
And it's been recorded if you want to refer anybody else to it or
okay,
listen to it again. Yeah. Thanks for showing up and sharing your time.